Everybody. What's today? Happy Tuesday. Man, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. My name is Jonathan Jones, and I'm excited to hang out with you all today. You know, we've been driving leadership lessons hard. You know, we've been going leadership lessons. But today I want to shift gears, right? The next few weeks, I want to shift gears, and we're going to start unpacking a few other topics to help you all become high-performing individuals, not just in the aspect of leadership, but also in the aspect of branding, also in the aspect of helping you to cultivate your own personal brand, right? Because there's no secret. The articles have been out there and the content has been shared, and also the laws or the bills have been passed. So now we know that there's this thing called brand, image, and likeness, and it's allowing student athletes to be compensated based on their brand, their image, and their likeness. So the best way we can sum that up is saying that athletes are now receiving compensation based on their name and based on the body of work that they've done or that they've created. Today, I want to talk about why athlete needs a podcast. We're going to let that sit for a second, and I'm going to run it under the bridge one more time, like my dad says. Why every, why every student athlete needs their own podcast. John, they're student athletes. They're going through a lot. They have a lot on their plate already. They have so much that they currently have to deal with. John, but they have games they have to compete in. John, but at the same time, they have to work out and stay in shape. There's so much stuff that they have to do. You're right. And for that very reason, I think that it's pivotal that every student athlete needs their own podcast, because the first thing is they can share this. When I was in school, right? And there was no secret. I wanted to play on the varsity basketball team. But understanding why I wanted to play varsity was because I knew that that would position me to play in college. Stay with me. And understanding that me playing varsity would position me and better equip me and better prepare me to play in college, I started doing what? I started looking at college rosters. I started looking at college guys' physiques. I started trying to figure out, well, what do I need to do to get to that level? I was already about 6'4", 6'5". So I was like, okay, I got the height piece. Now I have to get the stature. I have to put on the muscle. So I started doing push-ups, started working out, started running up and down my street. But at the end of the day, there was still a lot of time, meantime, in between time that I had ultimately to be doing other things outside of just playing the game and the sport. Keep it straight on the topic here. Why every student athlete needs a podcast. The first reason, I believe it was 2018. There was a poll done, said the average American picks up their phone. The average American picks this bad boy up 12 times a day. The average American picks up their phone 12 times a day. Let's go ahead and put that stat in there. The average American picks up their phone 12 times a day. I just want y'all to be able to see that. We're gonna put that. The average American picks up their phone 12 times a day. That's on average. So we know averages. So that means that some people do it less, that do it more. So I want to talk about, just for a second, imagine if every time, okay, we won't go drastic. We'll go right here. Imagine that if out of those 12 times a day, imagine that if 6 times a day, somebody was thinking about you. We'll call you Bobby. We'll say, because Bobby can be a boy's name, Bobby can be a young lady's name, or Bobby can be a name for an individual, however they choose to identify. So Bobby, we pick up the phone and I'm thinking about Bobby. I'm going to say, oh, well, what's Bobby doing on Instagram? Oh, Bobby has a podcast. Oh, let me see what Bobby's thought is today. The reason earlier I was talking about me being in high school and how I aspired towards being a student athlete and being a college athlete was because if I aspire to be like Bobby, and Bobby is a high achieving Division I athlete or student athlete, then I'm going to Instagram first. Then if I really want to get an inside look at Bobby's life, then I'm going to connect with Bobby on Twitter also. But then after doing these things, and I'm like, well, I want to get to know more about Bobby. I want to get to know more about Bobby's life. I want to see what Bobby goes through on the course of a day-to-day basis. How else can I connect with Bobby? Wow, Bobby has a podcast. So let me follow and subscribe to Bobby's podcast. Friends, everyone out there, if the average American picks up their phone 12 times a day, and let's say that you listen to podcasts, and the stats say that individuals typically listen to podcasts in the time they commute, so like 30 to 45 minutes. And if you have a 5-minute long podcast episode, when somebody's on a game road trip on the bus, they can be consuming your podcast content. When somebody is getting ready for a game, they can be consuming your podcast content. When talking about brand, image, and likeness, and you having the ability to be compensated based on your name, why not create a podcast? Because this allows you to create a platform, and this allows you to be viewed as the expert of your experience. As Dr. Fred, who my father is, always says, you're an expert of your own experience. Nobody can combat or nobody can debate your story based on what you share, because you're the expert of. So that's first. So the average American picks up their phone 12 times a day, right? We're talking about why every student athlete needs a podcast. Okay. Some more research. It was said that between 12 and 24, so if you're a college athlete, you're in that, you're stat, between 12 and 24, the ages of 12 and 24, these individuals, 40% of them are listening to podcasts. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and put that in the chat. Between the ages of 12 and 24, 40% of them are listening to podcasts. In the age of 20% of them, 40% of them. Between the ages of 12 and 24, 40% of them are listening to podcasts. 40% of them are listening to podcasts between the ages of 12 and 24. Understanding that you have a direct way to connect with those individuals who look up to you, those individuals who admire you, those individuals who you're mentoring from a distance. You might not know it. Just like the late, great Charles Barkley said, I'm not a role model. I'm not a role model. I'm just a basketball player. Because I can dunk a basketball does not mean that I can raise your kids. Charles Barkley said this. And understanding just that, begin to think of how big of a positive impact that you can have on these individuals. So the first reason you want one, because let's be honest, we know how the phrase goes. It says, cover your mouth before you cover someone else's. So you can cover your mouth by positioning yourself to be compensated based on your content or based on your story or based on your podcast, right? So that's first. We make sure that home is taken care of. But then second is the level of impact that you can have across the world. If you're an athlete, then you have the ability to, go out and play, go out and compete on the floor, which might be in the States, which might be in another country. But whenever you begin to create podcast content, you're international. You are international. On the first podcast that I launched called Speak Your Success, There were times I would begin just to check the stats and just to see where some of our streaming was coming from. We had people listening in the Ukraine. We had people listening in Japan. We had people listening in Mongolia. It was all across the world, in Ireland, and it blew my mind just to see where people were listening from. France. It was amazing. So first, you can be compensated. That's first. Second is you can expand your impact. You can expand your realm of influence, if you will. But the last one is this. You can build your brand. We've all heard Nike. The first thing you think about is what? Just do it. Apple, it's think differently. Chick-fil-A, it's eat more chicken. Starbucks, I believe, is your third home. Imagine if your name was put in the same caliber or the same category of those type of brands, and we know those brands are influential. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Why every student athlete needs to have their own podcast. Because in all honesty, looking back over my journey, I was a student athlete. But for me, that time has ended just as the same for you all. That time will end as well. And then you can go on and become a professional athlete, right? You can go on and become somebody who works in corporate or has their own company. But think about this. Just think about this for a second. If podcasts weren't such a great idea, then I don't think that there would be so many former professionals now coming into this space. I saw on LinkedIn the other day a gentleman by the name of Michael Redd, and he's done some amazing things just in the realm of being a Milwaukee Buck, NBA player, NBA All-Star, and then now seeing he's transitioning into other facets of business. But he's getting ready to launch a podcast. There are some other athletes, former NFL, former NBA, Jalen Rose, former NBA player, All-Star. He's has his own podcast, has his own show. Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, former NBA players, they have their own podcast. The list goes on and on and on. But the thing I want you all to take from this broadcast is this. Every student athlete needs a podcast. And I've launched 3 podcasts, and I'm really thinking about it now because student athletes need their own podcast. So, I mean, I would love to just take the time and show them how they can utilize this for their student athletes, for their program coordination. Because if you teach them, if you give a man a fish or a woman, they'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man or fish, if you teach a man or a woman how to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. If you give a man or a woman or introduce a man or a woman to a podcast, they'll learn for a day. But if you teach a man or a woman how to create their own podcast, they'll build a living and they'll build a brand. Friends, the first thing, like I said, you can be compensated. That's the first point I want you to take. The second point I want you to take is you can expand your influence, because these students and these individuals who are up under you, and maybe some people who might be older to you, they look up to you and they want to hear your experience. They want to hear more about you. They want to know your story. They want to know your day-to-day struggle. They want to know your day-to-day journey. So why not share that with them? And third, you get the opportunity to build a brand. And if you're a student athlete, you love the aspect of competing. You love the aspect of growing at a high level. You love the aspect of going against the grain and building something that's phenomenal. So my name is Jonathan Jones, and I'm here today with you, focusing on our brand image and likeness series this week. Like I said before, we're going to continue to unpack just a few different other topics, but I want to just implore you to understand and to know that every student athlete needs their own podcast because they have a story to share and they have impact that they can make. Jonathan Jones, if you want more information on me, go to jonathanjonespeaks.com. And I would love to just shoot you over a free chapter of my best-selling book entitled Process. So if you would like that, you can go to jonathanjonespeaks.com/email. That's jonathanjonespeaks.com/email. We'll just type that down there so people can see it. jonathanjonespeaks.com/email. So yeah, go ahead and just go to that site to make sure that you get that email does not have two L's in it. It's jonathanjonespeaks.com. Email. Technology is a beautiful thing. jonathanjonespeaks.com/email. And I would love to send you over a free chapter of my book entitled Process, 14 surprisingly behaviors to skyrocket millennials to success. But if there is a program out there, I can serve and support you. If you'd like to even find out more information about how we can help your student athletes launch their own podcasts or further help your student athletes build their own brand, please feel free to reach out. And I look forward to connecting with you all tomorrow. This has been another great session. And today, like I said, we're talking about why every student athlete needs a podcast. Brand, image, and likeness series. Take care, my friends. I'll see you tomorrow.